blood, betrayal, redemption. Three words that barely scratched the surface of what went down in Arlington, Texas on July 12, 2025. When the dust settled, when the Crimson River stopped flowing, when over 25,000 screaming fans finally caught their breath, wrestling history wasn't just made at Globe Life Field, it was violently reborn. And I promise you, by the end of this breakdown, you'll understand why AEW All In Texas wasn't just a wrestling show. It was the night redemption came wrapped in barbed wire and sealed with blood. AEW broke records that night. Not just attendance records. Not just the biggest North American gate for any non-WWE show in over 25 years. They broke something more important. They broke the Death Riders' stranglehold on professional wrestling. They broke Jon Moxley's reign of terror. And most importantly, they watched Hangman Adam Page break himself open, bleed himself dry, and claw his way back to the summit he never should have left. But before we dive into that brutal Texas deathmatch that had everyone on the edge of their seats, before we relieve every chair shot, every glass bottle shattered across human flesh, every drop of blood spilled in the name of championship gold, I need you to do something for me. If this is your first time watching SLAMZONE, or even if you've been here before, hit that subscribe button right now. Because what you're about to witness, the story I'm about to tell you, this isn't just another wrestling recap. This is 6 hours of pure emotion condensed into the most intense breakdown you'll see anywhere on YouTube. So subscribe, smash that notification bell, and become part of this family. Trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next. The show didn't just start, it exploded. Picture this, Globe Life Field, 25,000 fans creating a wall of sound so deafening you could feel it in your chest. The OPPs, Samoa Joe, Powerhouse Hobbs, and Katsuyori Shibata, defending their World Trios Championships against two-thirds of the Death Riders, Claudio Castagnoli and Wheeler Yuta, with Gabe Kidd replacing the absent Pacific. And right from the opening bell, these 6 warriors didn't walk to the ring. They ran. They sprinted. They collided like freight trains derailing in slow motion. Joe, that Samoan submission machine with violence in his DNA, he's throwing Yuta around like a rag doll. Hobbs, all 280 pounds of pure power, he's countering a doomsday device, catching Wheeler Yuta midair and turning it into a devastating power slam that shakes the entire ring. The crowd is already losing their minds and we're only 5 minutes in. Shibata, that striker who hits like he's trying to knock your soul into next week, he's trading forearms with Castagnoli, 2 of the stiffest workers in the business just brutalizing each other. And then it happens. Joe locks in that rear naked choke on Yuta. The Coquina clutch. You can see Yuta's face turning purple, his arms flailing, desperately reaching for a rope that's miles away. Joe drags him to the center, lifts him up, and boom. Muscle buster. Yuta's done. The OPPs retain and the Death Riders just took their first major loss of the night. The crowd is electric. They sense it. The tide is turning. But here's where things get interesting. The Women's Casino Gauntlet match. Now, going into this, everyone expected it to be a decent filler match. Boy, were we wrong. This turned into one of the most entertaining sequences of the entire night. You had talent coming out every 90 seconds, each one getting their moment to shine. The energy was building, the crowd was invested, and when it came down to the final 2, when Athena was standing there, that NJPW Strong Women's Champion who's been criminally underused, she did something nobody expected. She won. Clean. In the middle of the ring. And suddenly, we all realized what that meant. Mercedes Moné's later match with Toni Storm, the one everyone thought was a foregone conclusion for the CEO, just got a whole lot more unpredictable. Because Athena versus Moné? That's money. That's the rematch everyone's been begging for since their last encounter tore the house down. Now let me talk to you about something that broke my heart before it even began. The TNT Championship match. Adam Cole was supposed to defend against Kyle Fletcher in what would have been an absolute clinic, but hours before the show, Cole vacated the title. Injury. Health issues. Nobody knows the full story, but the way it was announced, the mystery around it, you could feel the concern radiating through the arena. Just like that, one of the most talented performers of this generation might have wrestled his last match and we didn't even know it was his last match. So the match became a 4-way. Kyle Fletcher, Daniel Garcia, Sammy Guevara, and the 55-year-old veteran Dustin Rhodes. And you know what? In front of his home state crowd, in the state where he was born and raised, Dustin Rhodes won his first singles championship in AEW. He pinned Fletcher after one hell of a match, and when that bell rang, when his music hit, the emotion on his face said everything. This wasn't just a title win. This was validation. This was a Hall of Fame career getting one more moment of glory in the Texas sun. The Hurt Syndicate's entrance alone was worth the price of admission. Bobby Lashley and Shelton Benjamin came out to a live performance of their theme by Westside Gunn, Smoke DZA, and MVP. The energy was different. This wasn't just a wrestling match. This was a spectacle. They defended their tag team championships against the Patriarchy, Christian and Nick Wayne, plus Kevin Knight and Speedball Mike Bailey in a 3-way dance. And it was chaos. Beautiful, organized chaos. MJF was at ringside helping the Hurt Syndicate behind the referee's back. Bodies were flying everywhere. Knight and Bailey were hitting moves that defied physics. Christian was playing the veteran heel role to perfection. But in the end, Lashley hit Christian with a spear so devastating, so picture perfect, that Christian probably felt it in his soul. The Hurt Syndicate retained and they looked absolutely unstoppable doing it. But then came the match that changed everything. Swerve Strickland and Will Ospreay versus the Young Bucks. The high-stakes match where if Swerve and Ospreay won, the Bucks would lose their executive vice president positions. And from the moment these four stepped into the ring, you knew you were watching something special. The Bucks tried to use every heel trick in the book. Super kicks with thumbtacks embedded in their shoes. Outside interference. trying to drive wedges between Swerve and Ospreay, two men who absolutely despised each other just months ago. But here's the thing about shared enemies: they create the strangest alliances. Ospreay, that high-flying wizard who moves like gravity forgot he exists, was hitting shooting star presses to the outside. Swerve was unleashing that lethal offense that made him one of the most dangerous men in AEW. The near falls kept coming. 2 count after 2 count after 2 count. The crowd was standing. Every person in that building was on their feet, hearts in their throats, watching these four athletes push each other past every conceivable limit. And when Swerve finally pinned Matt Jackson after an Oscar-worthy performance from all four men, the place exploded. The Young Bucks, stripped of their EVP titles, were humiliated. But more importantly, Swerve and Ospreay proved that sometimes, the enemy of your enemy isn't just your friend. They're your brother in war. Now, before I get to the 2 matches that will define 2025 in professional wrestling, I need you to do something for me. Hit that like button. Drop a comment telling me what you thought of All In, Texas. Share this video with every wrestling fan you know, because we're about to get into the matches that had grown men crying, that had social media breaking, that had everyone who watched it messaging their friends saying you have to see this. Kenny Omega vs Kazuchika Okada. Winner takes all. Continental Championship and International Championship on the line. The first ever unified champion would be crowned. And these two? They don't just have history. They have a saga. A rivalry that spans continents, that includes some of the greatest matches ever wrestled, that defined New Japan Pro Wrestling's golden era and helped build AEW into what it is today. Omega came back from diverticulitis, a condition so serious that we didn't know if we'd ever see him wrestle again. And you could see it in the early going. He was a step slower. His timing was slightly off. Okada, the Rainmaker, was controlling the pace, hitting those picture-perfect dropkicks that make it look so easy. But then, something clicked. Maybe it was muscle memory. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was the fact that these two have wrestled each other so many times they can predict each other's moves before they happen. Omega started mounting his comeback. V-triggers. One-winged angel attempts that Okada desperately blocked. The crowd was split down the middle, chanting for both men, appreciating the artistry they were witnessing. Okada hit the Rainmaker. Omega kicked out at 2.5. Omega hit the one-winged angel. Okada somehow, someway, got his shoulder up. And then, in a sequence that had to be seen to be believed, Omega hit a second one-winged angel. Okada's body went limp. The referee counted. 1, 2, 3. Kenny Omega, the cleaner, the best bot machine, was the first ever AEW unified champion. Okada had finally been pinned by his greatest rival. And even though he lost, even though the titles were gone, you could see the respect in Okada's eyes as they locked gazes one more time. Toni Storm vs Mercedes Moné. The Women's World Championship on the line. And this wasn't just a match. This was a statement. Moné came out like the queen she believes she is, cheerleaders from the Texas Rangers, the Texas Six Shooters, carrying all her championships. The car. The entrance that costs more than most people's houses. The confidence of a woman who hadn't lost a singles match in AEW. Storm came out as timeless Toni Storm, living in whatever decade her character exists in, completely committed to the gimmick even as 25,000 people were screaming. And when these two locked up, when they started trading offense, something became crystal clear. Mercedes Moné was about to lose for the first time in AEW. The match was technical brilliance mixed with raw emotion. Storm working over Moné's arm, setting up for that Storm Zero. Moné fighting back with those knees, with the Monémaker, with everything in her arsenal. The near falls were gut-wrenching. Storm hit the Storm Zero. Moné kicked out. Moné hit the Monémaker. Storm kicked out. Back and forth, neither woman willing to give an inch. And then Storm hit it again. Storm Zero for the second time. Moné's shoulders were pinned to the mat. The referee's hand hit for 3. Toni Storm retained. Mercedes Moné's undefeated streak was over. And as Storm celebrated, as Moné lay in the ring processing her first defeat, everyone watching knew we just witnessed the match of the night. Until the main event proved us all wrong. Jon Moxley vs Hangman Adam Page. Texas Death Match. The AEW World Championship locked in a briefcase that Moxley had been carrying around like a hostage for months. And this wasn't just about the title. This was about revenge. This was about redemption. This was about Hangman Page clawing his way back from the darkest period of his career to reclaim what he never should have lost. The match started and within seconds, blood. Hangman had a fork and he was stabbing Moxley in the forehead over and over, creating crimson rivers that flowed down Moxley's face. Moxley, the king of deathmatch wrestling, smiled. Because this was his element. This was where he lived. Barbed wire chairs came out. Glass bottles were shattered across backs. Page was pile-driven headfirst through broken glass. Moxley was hit with everything Hangman could find under that ring. And every time one of them went down, every time the referee started the 10 count, they would stagger back to their feet, refusing to stay down. The Death Riders came out. Marina Shafir, Claudio Castagnoli, Wheeler Yuta. The Young Bucks showed up and took out Page with superkicks and an EVP trigger. They set up a bed of nails. An actual bed with nails sticking straight up, ready to destroy whoever landed on it. Moxley hit the paradigm shift onto that bed of nails and somehow, someway, Page still got up before 10. Then the cavalry arrived. A video played from Mount Everest. Darby Allin, who'd been gone climbing the world's tallest mountain, sent a message to Moxley. But it was a distraction. Because Bryan Danielson, the American Dragon who'd been out with injuries for months, came through the crowd and started taking out every Death Rider in sight. The crowd was losing their minds. Well, Ospreay was out there helping. Prince Nana handcuffed Shafir to the ropes. And then, in the moment that nobody saw coming, Swerve Strickland's music hit. The man who Hangman Page has had a blood feud with for over a year. The man who Hangman duct-taped and burned his childhood home to the ground in effigy. The man who represented everything dark about Page's recent past. Swerve walked down that ramp, the entire arena holding its breath, and he handed Page a chain. The same chain Page had used against him. A sign of respect. A sign of forgiveness. A new beginning. Hangman wrapped the chain around Moxley's neck, draped him over the top rope, and choked him out. Moxley, the Death Rider, the man who'd held the AEW World Championship hostage, tapped out. The referee called for the bell. Hangman Adam Page was the new AEW World Champion. Page collapsed in the ring, bloodied, broken, clutching that briefcase with tears streaming down his face. He opened it slowly, reverently, and pulled out the championship that had been locked away for so long. The crowd was crying with him. This was redemption. This was the cowboy riding back into town and saving the day. This was wrestling storytelling at its absolute finest. 6 hours of wrestling. Over 25,000 fans. Record-breaking attendance and gates. Major returns from Bryan Danielson, Darby Allin, and Cope. Championships defended and lost. Feuds settled and new ones started. But at the end of it all, when the confetti fell and the lights went down, one image remained. Hangman Adam Page, standing on the second rope, holding the AEW World Championship above his head, blood mixing with tears, a cowboy who'd walked through hell and came out the other side wearing gold. If you made it this far, if you watched this entire breakdown, then you understand why All In Texas wasn't just another wrestling show. Subscribe to SLAMZONE right now. Hit that like button. Drop a comment and tell me which match was your favorite. Share this with every wrestling fan who needs to understand what they missed. Because moments like these, nights like that Texas evening, they don't come around often. But when they do, when wrestling is firing on all cylinders, when the stories make sense and the action backs it up, there's nothing else like it in the world. This is SLAMZONE, and I'll see you in the next breakdown. Until then, keep that passion for wrestling alive, and never forget that in Texas, on July 12, 2025, we watched a cowboy become a champion one more time.